Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our April 2019 Teaching and Learning for Student Success monthly webinar. Thank you all for joining us. We're thrilled to be joined today by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's Keylan Morgan, who will be presenting on the future of serving unprepared students in the state of Texas. We want to thank Keylan for taking time out of his busy schedule to do this webinar and to share this information with all of us. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Keylan Morgan. Keylan Morgan currently serves as the Program Specialist for Developmental Education in the Division of College Readiness and Success at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. A native of Galveston, Texas, Keylan lives out the philosophy that if you believe it, you can conceive it, and if you conceive it, you can achieve it. For almost 15 years prior to joining the coordinating board, Keylan served students as a TRIO program director, Educational Talent Search and Upward Bound, and most recently as the director of Student Success Initiatives for University College at Texas State University. These experiences and his personal story have shaped his passion for the success of marginalized and underprepared students in the P20 pipeline. He holds a Bachelor of Business Administration in Computer Information Systems and a master's degree in counseling and guidance. Embracing his love of learning, Keylan is actively completing the requirements for a PhD in developmental education with a specialization in learning support. Keylan has the honor of being married to his college sweetheart and is the father of 3 sons. Last, but certainly not least, he is a distinguished gentleman of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And now, without further ado, I turn it over to Mr. Keylan Morgan. Keylan?
Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me very well. All right. And I can't see myself, so I have my camera enabled, so it wouldn't be so boring. So you just would see the presentation and not my wonderful face for today. But thank you for taking time out of your busy days to tune into this webinar, The Future of Serving Underprepared Students in the State of Texas. So I'll talk about a few things throughout the context of the presentation, and just a heads up, on some slides, I'm going to move lightning speed fast. I put together a very comprehensive slide deck so you can have a thorough understanding of the background, as I naturally assume there'll be varied knowledge bases joining in on today in terms of TSI and things like that. So there's a lot of slides in here. I believe there's like 52 slides in the deck. However, as I stated earlier, I'm going to go through lightning speed through some of them so I can get to the meat of what we'll be sharing about. And that's really talking about how the landscape of developmental education in Texas is changing and what we're doing here at the coordinating board to facilitate that. So as you can see, the agenda, and it's pretty bare and it's on purpose. I didn't want to give you too much, but I'll give you an overview of the 60 by 30 plan. Hopefully you're familiar with that. I'll talk a little bit about college readiness. And when I say college readiness, I'll talk about it in 2 contexts. I'll talk about it first in the context of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and then I'll bring in the context of the Texas Education Agency so you can see how those two intertwine. I'll show you some trends with college readiness, and that's where we'll delve into the data, and I'll show you how underprepared students are faring in higher ed today. And we'll talk about where we are. And again, that's where we'll go a little bit more in depth of the data, and then it'll set the foundation for where we're going. And that's where I'll share with you some of the innovative things that are happening across the state in terms of developmental education. So jumping right in, our 60 by 30 plan here at the coordinating board, is comprised of 4 goals. Essentially, the first goal is the main one, and that's by the year 2030, that 60% of adults ages 25 to 34 will have some type of credential, and that could be from a level 1 certificate all the way up to a master's degree. The second goal in there is completion, that by 2030, 550,000 students will have completed, again, some type of credential. And the third goal, marketable skills, and this is a very important one. So as students undergo the coursework to obtain these credentials, we really want institutions to assist them and be more intentional with owning in on those tangible skills that students gain through the coursework that they're taking, to make sure that they're able to appropriately market themselves when they're in the job market. And last but not least, student debt, the fourth goal, to overall reduce the amount of student debt reduce the amount of debt that students are incurring as they seek out these educational opportunities. More and more across the state, we hear from faculty and staff at institutions that sometimes students just either decide not to go to college or feel they can't go to college or stop out of college because of financial barriers. So that's very much on our radar in terms of helping institutions streamline policies, procedures, and operations, the coursework that it takes to get to the credential, all in an effort to reduce the amount of debt that students incur pursuing a higher education. So let's jump right in. College readiness. What is college readiness? So from the coordinating board perspective, when we say college readiness, we're really referring to the Texas Success Initiative. The Texas Success Initiative does two things. It requires two things for all public institutions of higher ed in the state of Texas. One, that students are assessed prior to enrolling in courses, and they're assessed in reading, writing, and in math. And two, to advise and develop an individualized plan for academic success. And in that plan, it's institutions, it's on the onus of the institution to help the student understand exactly what it is that they must accomplish in order to be prepared for entry-level college work. So those first college level courses. And just a note that housed within the TSI statute as well, that for the purposes of admission, the TSI status of a student cannot be used. A little bit further with our definition. So when we say college readiness, it's the 70% likelihood that a student would achieve a grade or an A, B, or C in an entry-level college course. Note that when we say college readiness, and we have our college readiness standards here at the coordinating board, that they're aligned with higher ed faculty expectations. So it's not something that we necessarily do in-house, but we really tap the field to make sure that faculty have the say in terms of what the content standards for higher ed are. And the second part of the TSI is the Texas Success Initiative Assessment. And this is often confused when people say the TSI. This is normally the first thing that people think of, and that's the actual assessment. And note here that as of fall 2013, the TSIA is the only assessment approved by the coordinating board for IHEs or institutions of higher education to use to assess students for their performance in freshman level coursework. I alluded to it earlier, but there are three subject areas: reading, writing, and math. And the writing section actually has two components, and it's the objective section and the essay. And the next few slides I'm gonna breeze through, but I have them on here for your review as well. So all students prior to taking the TSIA must take a pre-assessment activity, and the TSI pre-assessment activity must do 4 things, and those are listed there. If your institution has challenges with producing a pre-assessment activity that meets these guidelines, the coordinating board actually sponsors one through Query Incorporation that we pay for, that you can sign on to, where you can have your students go through that pre-assessment activity. They're presented with a certificate as well as an email to where they can present it to your testing center as validation for the pre-assessment activity. And if you need more information on that, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. Here are the college readiness benchmarks for the TSIA. And again, all of the background that I'm giving you is a setup to the data that I'll present, as well as where we're going with developmental education. So if you've heard a lot of this before, just bear with me. So for reading, 351, math 350. In writing, it's 2 ways to meet it: an objective score of 340 and a 4 on an essay. And if the objective score is less than 340, an AB diagnostic score of 5 or higher, and an essay score greater than or equal to 5 as well. And excuse me, the AB diagnostic score is greater than or equal to 4. And note that in 2017, the validity study was done on the TSIA, which resulted in the lowering of the writing scores. And note, institutions cannot make up their own cut scores. Now, if you have some granularity to your cut scores as a means of placing students into varied developmental education options or interventions, that's absolutely fine. But an institution cannot say, well, we're going to say that we're going to use a 342 or 343 for math to qualify students to go into math 1332 or contemporary math without developmental education support. Institutions cannot do that. That goes against the TSI statute. A little bit more about the TSIA. It's a computer adaptive test. So essentially the first 20 questions of the test gives you the 310 to 390 score, and that's the one that we're all familiar with. However, if you don't score, if you don't meet the college readiness benchmark in those first 20 questions, the student is then put into one or two diagnostics as it currently stands. The first is the developmental education diagnostic, and that one it gives another range of questions, and it allows a report to be generated that shows the student's strengths and weaknesses. If the student scores lower than the DE diagnostic, they go into what we call the adult basic education diagnostic. And that diagnostic, it actually not only gives you the diagnostic profile, as I alluded to with the DE diagnostic, but it also will give you an additional indicator of a level 1 through 6, and those are aligned with the NRS standards. And that 1 through 6 comes into play a little bit later when I talk about House Bill 2223. But just so you'll know a little bit more about the ABE scores, if a student scores a ABE level 5-6, we treat them just as a regular developmental education student. So consider the diagnostic as a second chance for the student to prove their skills. So those first 20 questions gives you that objective score, that 310 to 390. And then if they go into a diagnostic, if they don't meet the college readiness standard at that point, again, it gives you additional measures of strength and weakness for the student. And it should be used in placement decisions when determining the appropriate coursework for the student. Note the student may take the TSIA at any time. And as a best practice, if you do have a student that I'm just going to go retake the TSIA, really encourage them to participate in some type of intervention prior to going retake the TSIA again. So how can a student demonstrate college readiness? And this is from the THECB. You can meet the benchmark set forth on the TSI assessment. You can do, we have certain scores for the ACT, SAT, and when it comes to high school students with the STAR EOC, only the English 3 and Algebra 2, and they must score a level 2 score, or is set forth at the score of a 4,000 right now. And then if a student participates in a college preparatory course at their high school, they can get a exemption with the IHE where the ISD have the MOU with. If they have an earned college credit in reading, writing, or math intense designated course, and that's as determined by the institution. For instance, if a student takes a college algebra course, that is a math intense course, TSI liable course. So when it's transcripted, it will be as college algebra, and that student will be deemed college ready by all institutions across the state in math. And those can be achieved through AP, dual credit. And again, just one more point there, the institution, particularly like with AP, so if a student earns an AP credit and the institution articulates it on the transcript as an elective and not in place of a TSI liable course to meet that college readiness standard, the student would not be college ready. So when it comes to like the transfer credits and where institutions have discretion and consideration, just note that does come into play. The definition of college readiness from the coordinating board differs from dual credit eligibility. And when TEA talks about college readiness and post-secondary college readiness, career and military success, it differs, and I'll give you some contextualization to that as well. So with the dual credit eligibility, note that it's not a college readiness benchmark. It simply qualifies students to enroll in college level coursework by areas. And I have some of the ways that students can qualify there, but for the full list in the Texas Administrative Code section 4.85, they're listed there. But note one of the important parts of this is that even though the student meets the above dual credit eligibility, they must make a grade of an A, B, or C in that college level course in order to be deemed college ready by the THECB standard. So merely enrolling in the dual credit course does not solidify that college readiness benchmark. The actual successful completion of the course with an A, B, or C does. And when we delve into TEA's college, career, and military readiness standards, note that these are the ones we have listed as of 4/2018. We're in the middle of a legislative session right now, so how all of this will look at the end of that legislative session, who's to say? But we don't anticipate it changing too much, but I always want to make that caveat. I'll note some highlights on this slide. So when you see it highlighted, that's where TEA and THECB are in line with each other in terms of we both identify those things as college readiness benchmarks. So if you meet the TSI criteria, and you have a variety of ways of doing that, 3 hours in English language arts or mathematics if you complete a course for dual credit. And again, that subject, and I have it one more point. So if it's italicized, it's conditional. But if it's just bolded, that's where we are actually in alignment. But where it's highlighted, we're in agreement. But if it's italicized, it's conditional between for the THECB. So the 3 hours in ELA or math, they have to be in TSI liable courses. And if you earn an associate's degree on either end, you're college ready on the TEA side for accountability. And then when you come to higher ed, the student would also be deemed college ready. Complete an on-ramps course, and you would notice I don't have that one highlighted, but it is italicized. So if you complete the on-ramps course, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on the program, but there are two different levels of passing. You can pass locally for the high school credit, and then if the student makes an A or B in the college level portion of the course, they can opt in and accept the credit. And if they opt in and accept the credit, and that credit is articulated by their receiving institution as a TSI liable, in place of a TSI liable course, or a course that they use to designate reading, writing, or math proficiency, that student would indeed meet the TSI standard. And on the next slide, it just clearly outlines the rest of the career and military readiness standards for TEA. So where are we? And here comes the fun part. And this is the part where I really like to get into, because it really starts to tell the story of why some of the changes in developmental education are happening, not only in the state of Texas, but across the nation. So the first slide that you'll see, actually, hold on one second. Let me. Trying to get back. There we go. All right. So in the first slide that you'll see, you see the percentage of FTIC cohort who enter college ready. And note that we still have some work to do. So although it's increased after 2 years of declines, we still have some work to do. So looking at all areas, we kind of took a dip from 2015, 2016, and we're starting to go back up in 2017. So some of the contributing factors, like the English 3 and Algebra 2 EOCs, were made optional a few years back by TEA. And for most college readiness proficiency or students demonstrating college readiness proficiency, it was their EOCs that allowed them to do that. So when TEA made them optional, most school districts opted not to offer them, which took away one way for students to demonstrate their college readiness, which we kind of attribute that dip from 14 to 16. And note that in 2016 to 17, it starts to trend back upward. And if you understand the dual credit programs across the state, they are growing hand over fist. So the more students participate in dual credit, the more completions, hence the more students are gaining those TSI exemptions, or they're demonstrating their college readiness early. So when they come to us, they're ready. So now we're starting to trend upward. The next slide breaks out entering students in terms of their college readiness status. So statewide, you'll see we're a little over 60%, right at 60%, but we still have some work to do, and you'll hear me say that a lot as I talk about our data slides. But when we parse that out into the two-year colleges versus the universities, you can really see a disparity. That you see the two-year colleges have a heavy lift in terms of almost 60% of the FTIC, or first time in college students entering our doors of higher education through community colleges, are underprepared in one or more areas. And for universities, not so much, and that's due to universities being able to set more stringent criteria for admission. Going a little further, so what happens to students once they enter our doors underprepared? And you can see right off the bat that almost half of non-college ready students from fall 16 remain not ready after 1 year in college. A lot of things contribute to this. However, dealing with the data on the slide, you can see that math is the subject where 60% after 1 year, they came in underprepared. They're still underprepared after 1 whole year. Yet, when you look at and 41% for reading and 45% for writing. However, when you look at the shaded blue areas, the light blue area is those that completed a first college level course. That might be through a co-requisite model program, or that student somehow ended up in that first college level course and they completed it. Therefore, they're deemed college ready. And then you have the darker blue, which is college ready, but no first college level completion. So those students may have retaken the TSIA, they may have completed their developmental education sequence in a standalone fashion, but at that point, they had not completed their first college level course. This kind of just breaks it out, the previous slide, into a little bit more granular fashion. But one thing I want to highlight on here is note that we're going in the right direction. Though for math, it's been an 11-point increase from 2011 to 2016, for writing 13%, and for reading 15% respectively. Okay. So I'll go back and recap this slide since you probably didn't see it. So this slide, I just wanted to highlight the progress that we're making in first college level course completion. And over the 5-year span that's represented in the, over the 5-6 year span that's represented here in this data, math has had an 11-point increase, writing 13%, and reading 15% respectively. But we still have some work to do. So you can see that now. Let's break it out a little bit more, and we'll break it out in where we're looking at universities and then 2-year colleges. So you'll see that it seems like the universities are doing fairly well. But one thing I always like to highlight on this slide is note the samples when we were on this slide, that the universities, in terms of the students that are coming in unprepared, is not as great, is not as a heavy lift as the community colleges are experiencing. So when we look at this, it's the telltale in terms of what community colleges are really up against. That at the end of that first year, 64% of students that enter underprepared in math are still not prepared at the community college, just opposed to just 40% at the universities. And you can see those numbers there for your viewing as well. And here's where it really starts to hit the fan. So after 3 years at the community college, when we're looking at data for the entering 2014 cohort, there's a 10% graduation gap between those students who enter that are college ready and those that are not college ready. And then when you think about those that are graduated or still enrolled, is 60% and 41% respectively. What does that mean? The data suggests that we may be losing a significant amount of students that are leaving our institutions. So those are graduated or still enrolled, but for the not college ready students, that's only 41%. So that difference, what's happening? So again, we have some work to do. At universities, more than 30% points higher for college ready students. So when we look at that, it's for those that are graduating that come in not, for students that come in not college ready, only 32% are graduating versus those who are coming in college ready, 65% are graduating. So these data from both the community college and the university side tells us a lot. When we think about traditional developmental education and how sometimes it could take a student upwards of 2 semesters, 3 semesters, or in some cases even 4 semesters if they had to repeat a course before they even had the opportunity to attempt their first college level course. That could definitely have a bearing on a graduation rate. I was at a conference not too long ago, and I heard a young man who was on a panel, and he gave his testimony of how he came in as a developmental education student, and he said he got all the way to applying for graduation at the community college, and he was called into the office about his application, and the advisor told him that he did not meet all of the requirements. What do you think that requirement might be? If you guess math, you are absolutely correct. The advisor shared with him that he had not met his math requirement, and he looked his advisor in the face and was like, how could I have not met my math requirement? I've taken 4 math classes. 4. Unfortunately, they were all developmental. So as we think about moving the landscape of DE forward in the state of Texas, I've shared with institutions across the state that it's going to force us to rethink our business models. That is that in the best interest of our students for them to have to take 2 or even 3 courses before they can attempt that first college level course. And where are we going? And this is where we'll jump into the future of serving underprepared students in the state of Texas. So what is this going to look like? First and foremost, we got the TSIA 2.0 set for fall implementation of next year, fall 2020. We're seeking to integrate reading and writing. And we're not seeking to, we are integrating the reading and writing section. This is to be more in line with what the SAT is doing, the ACT does with its English section, and the SAT, they've recently, when they redid the test, they even went a step further to show you that it was integrated by renaming that section evidence-based reading and writing. And even at the secondary level, so when you look at the English 3 EOC, per the rules, it requires them, or per the statute, it requires them to provide one assessment that assesses students in both English reading and writing. And note that with this change, that the current delivery of IRW is mandated at the highest level, so at the exit level. However, under prerequisites, any IRW course, it must be an IRW course that's co-reqed with a college level course in order for it to count for House Bill 2223, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So you'll see the expansion of the delivery of IRW at all levels, and we definitely want to move away from the standalone reading and writing, because the two do not exist really in buckets of their own. And what I see across the field is, with currently the way we have it with separate reading and writing scores, in the case where a student might be complete in reading but not writing, institutions are working quite creatively and sometimes quite hard to develop options to where it's equitable for students. The next thing that the TSIA 2.0 will do is improve the transportability of test results. As of now, through cross-institutional reporting, institutions have access to go in and pull student scores. But although every student at the end of each test administration is supposed to be provided with a hard copy of those results, we all know what happens with those results. So think about if a student took the TSIA in the 10th grade, and now they're showing up at the doors of your institution, and you're asking them for those scores, and they don't have them. Provided their name was entered correct, they remember exactly where they took the test, and their birth date. Those are the three things that you need to look up a student in cross-institutional reporting. Sometimes it's problematic retrieving student scores. So we really want to seek to empower the student to be able to send their scores to institutions and or be able to, on demand when they need it, log into the system and access those scores as can be done with the ACT and SAT. The diagnostics will be reduced to one. So we'll move away from the two-pronged diagnostic test that we have now, which is the developmental education diagnostic and the adult basic education diagnostic. And it'll just be one diagnostic that'll give you one score. So whereas now only the adult basic education students get the NRS level 1 through 6 score, now under the new TSIA 2.0, every student that's taken it will get that level score. And last but not least, I said it at its onset, the implementation date is fall 2020. So definitely stay abreast of the changes that'll be coming down the pipeline. We'll be very, very vocal. We'll be very, very public and transparent with the information. And as we attend conferences, we'll be sharing this information as we move forward in the process. The RFP to select the vendor is published in the Texas Register. So that process, proposals are due, I believe, on May 15th. And then we'll be working to review those proposals and select a vendor by our summer board meeting. Now I'll share with you some recommendations that we put forth in our statewide plan for supporting underprepared students. And this is our 2018 to 2023 plan. And a lot of what I'll share with you is really things that we're seeking to do to transform DE across the state. So the report was actually done in November, but it was approved at the January 2019 board meeting, and it was sent to the governor's office. It includes outcomes for the college preparatory course as required by House Bill 1776 that was passed in the last legislative session, and essentially it reports on the most effective and efficient ways for us to deliver developmental education across the state. The report included 4 major recommendations from us to the stakeholders, and that's that developmental education is delivered via co-requisite models as a whole by 2023, and community colleges have access to adult education and literacy programs either directly or through partnerships. All students completing the high school college preparatory course be administered the TSI assessment at the end of the course. And last but not least, funding for serving underprepared students addresses all students, not just those that have not met the TSI requirements, including those who are identified as college ready or not college ready, and those identified as college ready but are still struggling. If you're in the classroom or on the staff side, you see this all the time. A student may have made that 350 in math, but they're struggling in their college level math class. At my last major presentation I gave for grins, I asked faculty in the room, I was like, real quick, who can name the high DFW courses? And the buzz in the room became too much for my comfort level. It was almost like I asked you to start talking about something you really liked, because the energy just kind of swelled up. And I said, it's kind of disappointing when we find energy in talking about high DFW courses, those courses that our students are not being successful in. And of course, that kind of changed the temperament of the room. But the point is that just because a student demonstrates college readiness does not mean they do not need additional assistance to be successful in those college level courses. I was recently on a site visit, and as part of those site visits, I meet with students. I asked students, what is it that you like so much about these co-requisite models? And the student told me, she responded, I like the fact that it has the embedded support, and that's me just putting a little bit around her words, but she said she liked that it had the embedded support, and because she knew that the institution had a math lab and a tutoring center. However, she wouldn't have used it if she wasn't required to. So we know that students don't do optional. So again, this is one more way for us to help those students that may be considered college ready, however, that we know still are in need of support. The next piece of moving essentially DE reform in the state of Texas, and this is a major piece, and this is House Bill 2223, and this was passed in the last legislative session, and it requires institutions of higher education to develop and scale co-requisite models for certain underprepared students. So each institution at its greatest implementation with House Bill 2223, that 75% of students enrolled in developmental education at an institution will be required to be enrolled in a co-requisite model. Since my first day, literally my first day at the coordinating board, it was reporting to San Antonio to a co-requisite conference where I got to get essentially kind of like baptized by fire with all the good, the bad, and the ugly of what the perceptions of co-requisite models are and everything in between. So over the year, as I've been here at the coordinating board, I've learned a lot. And note that with House Bill 2223, we're very sensitive to the concerns of institutions, but in the greater context, it's about having students complete those first college level courses at a faster rate. So to increase that number of first college level course completions and getting students to them faster. When do the requirements take effect? I'm so glad that you asked. So we're in this first year of implementation, and institutions are required by semester, by subject area, to enroll, again, 25% of the students enrolled in developmental education. So we're not talking about the entire developmental education population at the institution. We're talking about just those enrolled in the developmental education courses that are offered on the campus. Next year, so as a fall, it'll go up to 50%, and then 2021 at its greatest implementation, 75%. And I just want to note that when I said by semester, summer is included. Another common question with House Bill 2223 is, who does it apply to? So students enrolled in a DE course or intervention and with a TSI DE diagnostic result, or a TSI ABE diagnostic result of level 5-6. So even if they test into the ABE diagnostic, if it comes back and they have an ABE level diagnostic 5-6, those students are required to be put into co-requisite models. And then last but not least, underprepared students enrolled in DE courses not otherwise exempt. If you go, we have methodology documents posted on the developmental ed webpage for the coordinating board, and you can review all of the caveats there in more detail. A high-level overview of students that are exempt from House Bill 2223. So if you assess, if you go into the ABE level, if you go into the ABE diagnostic and you get a score of level 1 through 4, or you're enrolled in a base NCBO, you're exempt in your first semester of enrollment only, or that first semester of reporting that they're in a DE course. So this gives these particular students in this group that are exempt a little bit of additional time to be prepared for either developmental ed coursework or for co-requisite coursework. If a student is reported as college ready, they're automatically exempt. If you're enrolled in an adult education or AEL program and reported, as such, you're exempt. And then if you're enrolled in a degree plan that does not require a freshman level mathematics course, the student is exempt from the House Bill 2223. I'm not going into it in this presentation, but this is relevant to the methodology that's used to calculate the House Bill 2223 percentage for each institution. So essentially, all of the students that I just mentioned in this particular group, they would be removed from what we call the denominator. And students that are enrolled in your co-requisite options that are subject to House Bill 2223, they comprise the numerator. So even if, let's just say, an institution chooses to enroll a ABE diagnostic level 4 student, which we actually support here at the coordinating board, it's our perspective that those students could definitely benefit from co-requisite models. So if that's currently not something you're doing, we strongly encourage you to consider that. But to my point, if a student is an ABE level diagnostic 4 student, if you put them in a co-requisite model, it doesn't help or hurt the House Bill 2223 percentage. They'll be removed from the denominator and they will not be included in your numerator. Real quick, a crash course in co-requisites as defined by House Bill 2223, and this is Rule 4.53. So when we're looking at it, co-requisites have been around for some time. These co-requisites are not new. However, prior to House Bill 2223, most co-requisites, they were the paired courses. However, it used a prerequisite model. What do I mean by that? It used a prerequisite model, meaning that the student had to pass the developmental education portion of the course in order to continue in the college level course. However, under House Bill 2223, that is not the case. But the co-requisite model as defined is where you have a co-enrollment between the developmental education course or intervention and the college level course. And the DE component or the DE course or intervention should be informed directly by what's happening in that college level course. And that's a continuation of the definition. And as I touched on earlier, participation in the DE component or how they do in the DE component is cannot determine whether or not the student can continue in the college level course. And just another point there, and as I traveled the state visiting with institutions about co-requisite models and grants that we have awarded, this is a concern for a lot of faculty that, well, if they're not doing well in the developmental ed portion, how are they going to do well in the college level portion? And that's where I push back to the institution and say, well, if you're charging them for that developmental ed component, you should be doing all you can and to make that as robust as possible and to meet the needs of the students to where you're giving them what they need to be successful in the college level course. And usually when we start to peel back the layers of the onion, there's usually areas of improvement that can be made to strengthen the DE component to help the student. This simply says co-requisite models are for high school complete students only. And House Bill 2223 simplified. Look at the graphic. Traditional pathway, you would have the DE course, and then in the next semester, if that was the exit level, you would have the college level course. Under co-requisite options, you don't necessarily bypass the DE courses, but as you can see where it says college level course, under that you have the co-requisite DE support, and that could be the DE course or intervention. But House Bill 2223 specifically reduces the amount of time and money students spend taking DE courses. It allows students to enroll in an FCLC course sooner with contextualized just-in-time support. And note that further in House Bill 2223, the number of DE hours eligible for funding was reduced for universities from 18 hours to 9 hours, and for community colleges from 27 to 18. Why is that important? So with the reduction of the number of hours eligible for funding, it's a challenge to institutions to kind of rethink that business plan. Does a student really need 24 hours of DE in order to complete those sequences, of courses, if they're coming in not prepared in more than one area? So as you saw in our recommendations in our statewide plan for serving underprepared students, that we hope that community colleges can develop partnerships if they can't directly provide the services, but develop a partnership to provide AEL programs. And what that does is for those lower skill students, those ABE level 1 through 4. And as I said earlier, though, we recommend the ABE level 4 students are put into co-requisite models. But in the case the institution is deciding not to do that, those students can be referred to AEL programs to get those necessary skills they need to be successful as well. And it allows them additional time to develop those skills that they need to be successful, either in their developmental education courses or that scaffold up into their developmental education courses, or if they'll transition from this into a co-requisite model. And note this slide, when we talk about our ABE levels by subject, it's a very small percentage. So when you calculate all of it, less than 5% of the total population that tests on the TSIA is testing as ABE levels 1 through 4. So that's where you can see the vast majority are coming in at that 4 range. So the AEL programs primarily for those levels 1 through 3, and that's why we're recommending there's strength in numbers so that those students could be successful, have the potential to be successful in co-requisite models with the appropriate support. And I'm going to fly through these slides because I want to leave a little bit of time for question and answer. But the last piece in there was to optimize, or a piece in our recommendations was to optimize the college prep the college preparatory course in high schools. So with that, right now what we're seeing is the college prep course in secondary is woefully underutilized. And what it does is it potentially provides the students with an exemption so they can come in essentially going directly into the college level course. And since it's being underutilized, we want to definitely promote the utilization of that, because you saw the numbers with the students that are coming in that are college ready, that the graduation rates and the first college level course completions are higher. So we're definitely promoting that. And the next few slides support that main goal, and I'll leave that there for your review as well. But I'll highlight on this data slide that the successful completion of A, B, or C, that's in the College Gateway course. So you can see that there is some success of students that are coming into the first college level courses from the college preparatory course, that there is success there that they're having in those gateway courses. So again, we want to promote the expansion or the utilization of that in the high schools to help have more students come to us college ready, again, in an effort to positively impact those graduation and FCLC completion rates. And what I'll get to now is some highlights of what's going on in the current legislative session. I shared with you when I was talking about the college, career, and military readiness standards for TEA that we're in the middle of a legislative session. So some of the proposed bills that might affect higher ed. The TSIA is incorporated in a lot of bills regarding K-12 accountability and every student and ESSA testing, which is Every Student Succeeds Act, and that's a federal policy that requires students to be tested once in math and once in reading in high school. Allowing the score to set by the board on high school equivalency tests, GED, to be eligible for TSI exemption. That's a bill that's currently being considered. And with that one, what we really want to know is what might that look like in terms of a validity test that supports that the GED does meet the college readiness standard, and what that threshold would be. Reducing mandatory tests for K-12 students. There's a number of bills on the table that eliminate end of course exams altogether. So we're paying close attention to that. And improving the transferability and applicability of courses. Transfer is always something that's at the forefront of our minds here at the Higher Education Coordinating Board, as we want to make sure that the work that students engaging in at one institution, particularly that core coursework, if they transfer to another institution, whether that be from the community college to the university, or from university to university, community college to community college, that those courses are applicable and students aren't engaging in coursework that cannot be broadly applied to their goals in terms of their pursuit of higher education. And that's actually my last slide. I know I threw a lot of information at you in a very short amount of time, but as you'll have this slide deck available to you, and if you have any questions or concerns about anything that I've shared, definitely do not hesitate to reach out to me via email or phone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keylan. And I know some folks may have to go at this time, but we are going to open up for Q&A if you can stick around. We do have a couple of questions that came in already. And I just do want to echo what Keylan just said, which is on the Catch the Next website, www.catchthenext.org. We will have both the video recording and the slideshow for Keylan's presentation available. So I'll be sure to send that link out to all of the attendees for today once we get that up and going. So let me go ahead and go on to our first question. This one comes from Dora Elias McAllister. She says, in January 2018, Commissioner Paredes expressed serious reservations about the expansion of dual credit. At that time, 110,000 high school students were college ready as determined by the scores on the SAT, ACT, or TSIA, but 150,000 students were taking dual credit courses. Thoughts on that?
Commenting on the commissioner's comments. Well, I can agree with you that dual credit over the past 5 years has grown exponentially. However, cautioning the expansion is really along the lines of when we think about really understanding the rigor of the courses in terms of it's something that's a common conversations circling dual credit in terms of, okay, you have the high school teacher with 18 hours of content. They're now made the dual credit government teacher. Is that course the same rigor as if the student was sitting on a community college campus or in a college campus and taking that course? And that's where a lot of times our apprehension comes into play here at the coordinating board. So that's about the most breadth I can give to that. But in terms of the expansion of dual credit, I mean, we're getting to the point to where we have more and more students that are completing associate's degrees prior to graduating from high school. And there's actually a bill in the legislature now that would require a student to receive college level advising, not high school level for dual credit, but legitimate college level advising at the completion of 15 hours of dual credit. So there's a lot of components to, I guess, and I use it very loosely, of some of the troubles that could be perceived with dual credit, but those are a couple.
Yeah, thank you. I know that also the coordinating board had put out a report in October about credits and transferable credits and things like that. And one of the findings in that report was that dual credit students tended to have far more credits at the time of graduation than students who hadn't pursued dual credit. At the same time, we all know that it is, a, an equitable practice too, the expansion of dual credit. So
Yes, and that's the six in one hand, half a dozen in the other.
mm-hmm. Excellent. So here we have a question from our own CEO, Dr. Maria Marta Chavez. Let me see if she might have audio. I can unmute her. Maria, can you test your
Yes,
mic?
thank you. Thank you,
Mhm.
Keelan. We really appreciate you taking the time, particularly this Thursday with vacations coming up for the weekend. I have listened to you many times and I always learn a lot. So thank you much. I have a question regarding the TSI 2.0. You
Okay.
indicated that that's effective fall of 2020. And I'm wondering, do the students starting the fall session have to have taken it during the summer, or will those students come in under the previous TSI and the ones coming in the spring will take the 2.1?
A little more of the latter of what you stated. So it's gonna follow. We're anticipating it to follow the same rollout as it did with the first TSIA, where on the institution's first class day, that's when the TSIA 2.0 becomes effective. So it's not. It may not be. Let's just say August 15th. It might be August 15th if that's your start date. So what's going to happen is everybody who's taken the old TSIA up until then, those scores can be used for placement. After the first class day, if placement hasn't been determined using the old scores, students will be required to retest.
Mm.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. We have some classes whereby by midterm a student could be passing English Comp 1, but failing the integrated reading and writing. And what happened, some people panic and the students were dropped. And
Mhm.
I thought I had heard that if they were passing the English Comp 1, that they should pass the other. I'm wondering what flexibility there is with grading.
There's a lot of flexibility with grading, and unfortunately, it's a locally determined policy. So it may vary from institution to institution exactly what that looks like, or in some cases, even at the institution, from department to department that oversees developmental education. I was recently at one institution where the philosophy of one department was if they weren't doing well in the DE course, but they were doing well in the college level course, we'll keep our eye on them. And if they pass the college level course, they get a pass in the DE component. Um, and then on the other side of the house, it was just the opposite of kind of like the first part of your statement. So even at that institution, it operated different. But
Mm.
our stance here at the coordinating board is we use two words, and y'all have heard me say this before. It depends. So if a student is just literally not showing up to class um, to the DE class, the institution has to make a decision. If the student is making A or B or whatever grade they have determined to be successful in that college level course, if the student is not needing the DE component and they're still being successful in the college level course, um, keep an eye on them, have them check in, but don't drop them because it has other significant implications as well, due satisfactory academic progress or financial aid, to name
Mhm.
one. However, just the mere fact that most cases institutions are using a 3x3 model where they're taking a 3-hour DE course or intervention and the 3-hour college level course. If a student is taking 12 hours, that's half their hours gone. So there's a lot of considerations to it, but if there's faculty or staff that's involved with that particular process that's under the sound of my voice, I would say really think to always do what's in the best interest of the student. I always say these three words, I've kind of coined them, and it's in our infinite academic wisdom, we want to hold students accountable. We want the rigor, but we have to give space for sometimes the fact that student self-efficacy can kick in, and they might go to that DE intervention or course for 2 or 3 weeks and feel like I got what I needed and I'm doing good over here, and take off. They got that refresher that they need and they're doing well. So it kind of pushes the ball back in the institution's court as well to really step back and think, are we offering to the best of our ability, the variety of interventions to meet the diverse learning needs of students and the diverse needs of students? Because honestly, every student doesn't need a 3-hour robust intervention. But in some cases, every student is truncated into a 3-hour robust intervention. And if the student doesn't find value, they're less likely to fully engage beyond the fact that I have to.
Right. Thank you. Yes, we'll have to work with them on that. Yeah, thank you
I'm
much.
curious, Keylan, thank you too for your questions, Dr. Chavez. I'm curious too, Keylan, like when you go out on these site visits and you speak to students, what are their perceptions of co-requisites so far? Can you give us some positives and some negatives that you've heard?
Very much so. And this will be kind of data that we'll start putting together to really put out in the summer. We'll be presenting at the HCC Co-Requisite Conference, where we'll be presenting brand new data. Hopefully, well, we're anticipating we'll have the brand new data on the first semester of House Bill 2223. And we're looking at it in some very interesting ways. But what I hear in the field from students specifically is, things like, I ask very pointed questions. The first question I usually ask is, so help me understand how you ended up in this course. Just to see from an advising perspective, is two of my other favorite words, due diligence. Is due diligence being done in the conversation in terms of explaining to the student what the co-requisite model is, what the benefits are, and doing having an effort to reduce the anxiety of a student for having to take a higher number of hours in the same subject. For instance, particularly when it comes to math, when you tell me that you have to take this math 13, 14, you will let you take this math 13, 14 course, but you also have to take a another 3-hour math course. That's 6 hours worth of math. And to a student that might have any type of math anxiety, that might be enough it's like, wow, without the proper narrative behind that, it could be problematic. That's one question that I ask. The next question I ask is, how do you feel about the co-requisite model? And then I make sure they understand what the co-requisite model is. And most say they like it. And it's to the example that I gave earlier in the presentation, that one young lady looked me right in my face and she was like, Mr. Morgan, I know we have a writing lab, I know we have a math lab, but I wouldn't use it if it wasn't required. So for some odd reason, there's this perception, or I'm not going to say perception, I don't know if that's the right word, but there's a hesitation for a number of institutions to require support in the context of their first college level courses. And it was paramount at a community college district that I visited, where they brought in support services from multiple campuses. And I was talking, and one of the things that our grants funds is their supplemental instruction. And on one campus, they talked about these very positive success rates that they were having, and then even, of course, transposing their number of visits to SI with student test grades and things like that, that they were having great outcomes. And on the other hand, another campus in that district was telling me, well, we just can't get our students to come. And then something, I was just like, let me guess. I say, you all require it. And they were like, yes. And I said, you all don't. And they were like, we don't. But again, in an effort, they're trying to provide autonomy to students. However, I look at it as sometimes when we're in the classroom, we have to save students from themselves. And that's what I believe co-requisite models seek to do. And the last thing I'll highlight in terms of what students tend to say about co-requisite models is they appreciate the fact that they have additional dedicated time to work on the things that they struggle with. So it's not additional time out of their day. It's almost like I always tell people it exists if it's on my calendar. So by proxy of that support course or that DE intervention or course being on their course schedule, it allows them to engage in the necessary support that they need, and they're not resistant. They're not resistant to it. But on the flip side, I will tell you this: there was one interesting comment I heard at an institution where I was observing a course, and at the end of the course, a student came up to the instructor and flat out said, "Whoever does this TSIA, they need to do a better job, because I only missed the TSIA by like 1 or 2 points, and I'm having to take this course, and I shouldn't have to be in here." But when we peel back the layers of the onion, it wasn't that the student didn't see value in the course. It was that it was a 3-hour intervention, and the student essentially was considered a bubble student. So for that student, do you need the same type of intervention for the student that misses it by 1 point or 2 points than for the student who scores a 339? And that's one thing where I'm really working with institutions. Both Suzanne and I work with institutions day in and day out to help stratify that range of intervention that they're offering to better meet the specific needs of students. I often go into my motivation theory in terms of challenge and support. If you give too much support and the student don't feel like, if it's too much support and the challenge is not great enough, there's not going to be success. The student is just not going to work. If there's not enough support and the challenge is too great, it's not going to be successful. So it's finding that sweet spot, and that's where institutions really have to the best of their ability. And I understand scheduling constraints, classroom space, and things like that, but we're here to the best of our ability, help with innovative options to diversify the array of interventions that institutions are offering. Did that answer your question, Lydia?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I was kind
That's great. And we just have one final question, which is about the college prep courses. This one is also from Dr. Elias McAllister. Why are the college prep courses being underutilized? They're probably are already being promoted, no?
Okay, so I'm glad you asked that question, because for Greens, when we wrote the recommendation to promote the utilization of the college prep course, I went back and read I want to quote, it's like 28104, I believe, where the college prep course is outlined in House Bill 5. And what it really says is so broad that essentially it has to be on the books, it has to be offered, but it doesn't say students have to be enrolled. It says that districts have to promote the importance or the benefit of the course, but you don't necessarily even have to offer it or enroll students in it. So when it comes to the actual teeth in terms of what you have to do with the course, it's very, very vague. Hence, if you call TEA, it's really hard to get to someone who could really give you a very distinct answer about the college prep course. And even if you call the coordinating board, it was very hard to get someone to give you a distinct answer about the college prep course. So I don't want anybody to say, oh, well, he's throwing TEA under the bus. No, I'll jump in that pool with them. But we do understand that when we start to look at that FCLC success data with the college prep course, that something's happening there with those partnerships for those IHEs and ISDs that are doing it. And the students are coming into those first college level courses and they're showing some success. So definitely we want to see more of that. And again, it's one more way for them to demonstrate their college readiness prior to them coming to the doors of institutions of higher education. But to go back to the original question, it's a very vague piece of the bill. So its implementation wasn't really spelled out. So that's one of the major challenges with the underutilization of the college prep course.
Well, thank you so much. Again, thank you for your time, Keylan. Thank you for all the incredible information. As I said before, we'll make sure and have the slideshow and this video recording of the webinar up on our website. The video recording will also be up on the Catch the Next YouTube site, so we'll be sure and send that out. And we're going to skip college announcements today since we're about 15 minutes over time. So we hope everybody... No problem at all. We needed it. And we hope that everybody has a wonderful holiday weekend, if in fact you have a holiday weekend, and happy Easter to all.
Say my break starts now. Thank you all so much. And CTN, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your series as well. I'm humbled and grateful.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
All right. Hey, again, thank you. And you all have a great day and a happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.